I'm here as a token. I'm the only white Anglo-Saxon male token around. So when the mainstream needs a heterodox economist, you guys are way too heterodox for them. They call on me, so I'm the heterodox economist for the mainstream. When heterodox economists need a mainstream, they call on me,
This is not why we called you, but okay,
but so I'm in between there, very, very sympathetic to the ideas of heterodox. Not very sympathetic to calling oneself heterodox. Because if the ideas are right, they're economics. They're not heterodox or orthodox or anything else, and good economists recognize that. And so I, avoid calling something heterodox or orthodox. I call it economics, and it's good economics or bad economics, and one can debate about that. In terms of textbooks, it's much harder. And let me support your decision to include money multipliers, because I included it, and I'm in my 10th edition. And the reason, not saying here it's true, I tell people, here it doesn't fit at all. But it's something that's part of the market. And the textbook market is an institution. It is not something where here we're giving our sense of the reality to students. It's a set of things, a set of people who've gotten used to teaching in certain ways, and you have to fit any book into that way or it doesn't have a chance. So when Neva first had the idea of this going to come up, she called me. And I suggested, here's what you can do, here's why this won't work, what it will work, and everything else. So I was very supportive of creating it, but I said it's going to evolve into something that, Mark won't like if it's going to succeed, because that's the nature of the market there, and I think you have to look at the market and what's going there. So that's what my talk is about today, and the paper is there, and I thought I wouldn't talk about the paper much, because you can read that, but it's why textbooks should, but they won't change. And they won't change, is because really it goes to the title of this session, Teaching Economics After the Crisis. Within mainstream economics, when I go there, the question is, what's the crisis? At least within economics. Demand for economists is still very high. We're getting money from the schools. We can keep on doing what we're doing. There's no reason to change. As a matter of fact, there's a paradox. The worse the economy goes, the more demand there is for economists to talk about it. And so demand for economics, is doing well. And as long as it's doing well, there's very likely to be little change within the profession. Second point, textbooks are not about what goes on in the economy. Now, let me repeat that. Textbooks are not about what goes on in the economy, at least the introductory textbooks. The introductory textbooks have developed into a set of models, a set of ideas that are taught in various ways and will be taught. So when they recruited me 25 years ago to write an introductory text, I was a relatively young guy there, and they wanted me, and they came and wined and dined me, best champagne, everything else. Here, we really want you. And, oh, yes, we want you for your ideas. Then I signed the contract. And I wrote it, a book with new ideas in it, different. Then they sent it out for reviews, all to the same people who there. It got panned. Absolutely panned, because that's not what they wanted. They wanted me for my writing style. And the word of publishers is, if he only didn't have any ideas, or would keep his ideas to himself, he could become a Mankiw. But no, I let it in and play my 15% role, and what I figured out was here, by having a text that was out there and saying here, recognizing here's the market, but attempting to sort of add change wherever I can at the right time, right place, where it might make some difference. So I attacked aggregate supply and demand. I tried to dump it from the text. I failed, but I got some modifications in it, and I can sort of go through things. So every textbook author of the top ones are following what the others are doing, what's selling, what isn't, and what's changing. It's a market that's responsive to the marketplace. Publishers don't care what they publish, other than whether it'll sell or not. And so that's the nature of textbooks and the nature of the market, and I think it has to be seen as that. Now, in my last edition, I felt there's a lot of change. The crisis allows some change to happen. So I wrote some stuff on structural stagnation. Not secular stagnation, structural, because there's a difference in sort of going through there. So I had a whole chapter on that. I had it on, sort of non-standard monetary policy. I put that in. The reviewers didn't like it too well. And I said, it's going in anyhow. It hurt sales. Essentially, sort of that is the market. They don't want to discuss this stuff. Why? Because most of the people who teach it aren't comfortable talking about the latest developments in theory or anything else. They've learned some simple things that they're teaching, and, they want to be that comfort. You have to keep the people who are adopting the book in their comfort zone. And I keep pushing people outside their comfort zone, and that isn't good as an author. But I've made plenty of money on it, so I'm willing to spend some of my rents to try and make change in the profession itself and in the textbooks. I think, so let me now move to sort of what is changing in textbooks. So we're discussing the 10th edition of my book now. And the question is, so we have a meeting and everything else. And the publisher, just met with me, and they said, we're not interested in what your content is. Let me repeat that. The publisher said, we're not interested in what your content is. Our focus very much now is on how it's being presented. So essentially, sort of, they are creating sort of an online learning system, an online adaptive learning system that it has, and they tried to convince me to take on a digital co-author. So all the major texts will be taking on digital co-authors, whose job it will be to sort of build it into sort of a whole digital learning platform. Why are publishers doing this? Because they want to sort of sell that platform, because you get schools tied into that platform, and they're tied in long term. And that's sort of the way they're structuring it. And the publishing structure is different. It used to be you sold textbooks. So I used to, sort of early, sort of reports on my book. Here, you sold this many of your micro, this many of your macro, and this many of the combination. Now, sort of the royalty reports are 140 pages long of various chapters, various versions, various other things, custom publishing, online versions. Various combined with here is Connect. Here is our latest one, which is Heritage, sort of that's building in. How are we adapting for that? That's their focus. So McGraw-Hill, which is a major publisher, they'll have 4 texts and sort of operating. They used to sort of, I'd go to sales meetings, and they had 140 sales reps. And I'd go and make a presentation. This is why my book is great. And I encourage people, and they go out and try and sell the book. They don't have me there anymore. They don't have any authors there, because what they do is sort of present the learning system to them. And then the rep goes out and tries to sell the learning system. And then, sort of they say, oh, we can fit this into any book. It doesn't matter. All the books sort of will fit in. And I said, my book differs in content. They say, don't make it that differ in content. It won't fit in so well. But it still differs in content, because where I believe I have to make the change, it is. But that change is really going there, and that goes along with a bigger change that is occurring, where I think change will occur. Professors are obsolete. Let me repeat that. Professors, at least the number of professors we currently have, are obsolete. Automated learning, adaptive learning systems will replace 80% of the professors over the next 40 years. Okay. That being the case, publishers see themselves as trying to get in that space. That's what they're moving on, that's what they're focusing on, totally. And if one's talking about how do you get change, it's how do you put change into that automated learning systems? Because if you're only teaching here facts or models that are there, that can be done online, and they're creating lots of scientific evidence that it can be done more effective online than it can be by professors. Where you need professors is where there's nuance. Where here you're not teaching facts. You're not teaching models that are the truth. You're teaching what John Stuart Mill called half-truths. Yeah, they shed some light on it, but they don't tell you what's going on. That involves all kinds of judgments. Having a sense of when the assumptions are right, when they are not wrong. When you can have that nuanced structure is there. Professors who can provide that will be enormous room for them in the future. But that's not what our schools prepare people to do. And so really that's where the need is going to be, because that's something the adaptive, online, learning systems yet, the expert learning systems, haven't been able to move up to. They're trying to, and trying to develop it. So, in terms of adding a post-Keynesian view, I'm trying to have what I call a nuance button on my automated learning system that they're developing with my book. That here, it leads you through, say, a model like supply and demand and minimum wage. And here, minimum wage is going to cause unemployment. Press the nuance button. No, not necessarily. Because here, there's elasticity issues, and maybe supply and demand wasn't the right model. What if we had a monopsony model? You'd have all kinds of reasons why not, and when we look at the empirical evidence, it doesn't seem to affect it much at all. So it'll try and add that to there, and I've been able to sell that to the publishers. And that's the way I think you can do it. So you have to operate within the space within which the change is occurring, to put it. So I'm thinking of having a post-Keynesian app to go there. So here's the chapter, and it's a standard chapter. Press the post-Keynesian app. No! Maybe I can recruit Mark to do it. That's not right. And here in 3 minutes is what's there. Why does it have to be 3 minutes? Because that's students' attention span. That's as far as you can get. If you go beyond that, you're finished. How much?
You have 9 minutes.
3 minutes, okay.
No, 9 minutes.
9 minutes, oh, she's...
No intervention.
Okay. Essentially, in the paper, I talk of two changes where are happening. And one is how one teaches macro theory. The way I would love to teach macro theory is there is no macro theory. It's way too complex for us to understand. So to talk as if we have a theory is crazy. And that's as crazy for post-Keynesians as it is for orthodox mainstream economists. The DSGE model doesn't capture it, and no post-Keynesian model captures it either. They capture aspects of it, and really it involves the judgment. When is it relevant and when isn't it? And clearly, Blanchard's, judgment, I think people would say, well, putting it in a little dark corner, that's kind of crazy. Because that dark corner spreads throughout the entire economy and always is possible to just with a snap of the fingers suddenly move you from what looks like the great moderation to the enormous crisis, and you're on that at every point. Now the way in which, so I just finished a book on complexity theory and the art of policy, Princeton University Press, they're not here, but and sort of in that book, we discuss here complex systems, talking about the economy as a complex system, thinking of it, provides a much deeper theoretical insight into it than what's going on. It evolves. It's extraordinarily complicated with multiple levels of institutions, one on top of the other, that sort of provide the reality that goes. There's no way we're going to capture it all in theory, but nonlinear dynamics provides you with some insight on what's going on. So here you can have not equilibria. You dump the concept of equilibria and replace it with, you have basins of attraction. So there's multiple equilibria there, and policy is not so much how do we move to the equilibrium. Policy is about how do we sort of choose, develop equilibrium selection mechanisms that might move you from one, right when you're at the cusp, to another. It won't always work there because it depends where you on there, and sort of providing that and studying it is what economists should be doing, and sort of analyzing that. So that's sort of one sort of direction that I went. So it says here, if we're teaching the multiplier, it's not a multiplier that's a single thing that's always going to be true. Here, if you're at the right point within this sort of ecosphere, sort of on a basin of attraction, you can have it. So it's a catalyst to move you a little bit, and then it'll carry on. And so it's right time, right place. Everything has to be seen within that, not within here, this works or doesn't work. So that's sort of the first one. And the last one, just to tie in with the general theme of the conference, is on distribution theory. Now, the standard way it's approached is that technology determines distribution, and we can take things as given. What I've been trying to do is sort of push it towards where, so much more what I call a John Stuart Millian approach. And Mill is my, hero in some sense when I'm looking at economics, because he went crazy. He had a mental breakdown trying to fit the models to reality. And any reasonable person who tries to fit the models to reality will have a mental breakdown, or should. He then discovered the Romantic poets and the humanists, and sort of here, there's more to life than these models, and the models are only half-truths. And recognizing that they're only half-truths, then you can sort of, I can deal with them. Yeah, it's there, sort of understand them and making the judgment, fitting in the passion, fitting in all the aspects to sort of lead to the result. That's what economics is really about. And what he said was, here, distribution is not determined by technology. Distribution is not determined by technology. He broke from that. It's determined by customs, institutional structures. And the way to change distribution is not to sort of say, here, can we tax, sort of just to change something, but to change the customs and institutional structures so that it leads to an equal distribution, a more equal distribution, as opposed to sort of trying to sort of change something after the fact. Sort of in sort of my latest work, I talk about the takeaway principle. And the takeaway principle means, here with my kids, if I give them an ice cream cone and try to take away, they cry 7 times more than if I just say no to begin with. So building sort of policy into the ecostructure is really the key element of thinking about policy in a complex system. And I think that's what I'm pushing on for distribution theory. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Wonderful, brilliant timing.